I think one of the most important things for people to get clear about right up front is how much of the perceptions that they have about the world, the places outside of their immediate location, are mediated, and that the very act of putting things into a media pipeline means it gets narrowed and squeezed and things get left out. So there's an assumption that because we can follow a Twitter feed from Tahrir Square or anywhere else in the Arab Spring, that we have an idea of what's actually going on and that we know what's happening in that community. And that it gives us this false sense of connection to people around the world. But the media filter, and then as Eli Pariser wrote about really beautifully in the filter bubble, what's happened with all of that is that there's so much that gets left out. And then to realize that happens in our own backyard as well. That they're the things that we see because they're immediately in front of us, and if we try to extrapolate that out very far, the further and further you get from the original point of encounter, the weaker and weaker those assumptions get. And so I think as arts leaders, as media leaders, it's to remember that there are some core skills that we need to be putting into play to help engaging with the rest of the world. When we realize how limiting the media filter is and how much gets left out of our own media bubble, then we pretty quickly realize that what we have to do is leave our spaces, leave our buildings, and actually get out and interact with people. And as soon as you start to do that, then two things really happen. One, you run up against your own preoccupations and obsessions and limiting factors, so you've got to start to deal with all of that. And then number two, you start to interact with people who aren't particularly interested or care about or as obsessed with the arts, the role of the arts, the impact they can make in their lives. And so you have to then figure out how do you serve them in a different way. So, these essential skills of authenticity and reciprocity and having real empathy for what's going on in the world around us, and then asking questions about how do we serve people from a servant leadership position. These all start to become questions to drill down into so that we can go out into the community with the things that we're really passionate about, but have a real reciprocal relationship with the people that we're trying to serve. So it's not just that push, consume our obsessions and our passions, but then also leaving room for their obsessions and their passions, and for us to start to talk openly about the wants and needs that both sides have, and see how the things that we care about can fit into their lives and can be meaningful, and then understand how we can be touched and be changed because we're bringing them into our organizations, and seeing how we can do more with what we have than we ever really thought. So the way we've tied that together in Detroit is really developing a deep appreciation for acquiring a new kind of cultural fluency. So, we recognize that as public media professionals, we have a lot that we know. We're journalists. We cover the city. We report on the city. We host people at our shows, and still at the same time, for us to go out into the neighborhoods where our traditional audience, which is overwhelmingly educated, middle class to even affluent, externally focused, they see themselves as global citizens. You go into a lot of the neighborhoods in Detroit and in Southeast Michigan, those factors aren't at play. That's not who's living in those neighborhoods. And so for us to have this kind of cultural fluency, for us to be able to speak and hear, with them, we have to really learn new language. We have to change the way we listen. And that's really the process of us going into neighborhoods, absent of any news story, stepping away from the transactional journalism model, which is, event happens in your world. I show up so that I can capture it and then bring it back and report it. No, it's going into your world, absent of any conflict, absent of any event, and asking, well, what should the world know about your life? What should the world know about what's happening? What are you proud of? What's exciting about your life? And how can we help to make people more aware of that? So it's a whole shift away from that transactional journalism model of we parachute in, or we, as we say to people really often, you notice that we're in your neighborhood and there isn't a body on the sidewalk. which is usually when the media shows up in most lower income communities all across America. So we go into these neighborhoods absent of any conflict, and then it's about employing really traditional and time-tested community organizing skills. How do you show up and get to know the people who have real authority and real power in their neighborhood? How do you build trust with them, recognizing that time is a really critical factor? And so you have to show up in the coffee shop, you have to show up in the church basement, you have to ask them into the radio station over and over and over again, and it might take a year before something really pays off. But at the end of the day, the relationship, which is really our relationships and our good name are all that we're really buried with. It's the relationships that are so strong, and that when the time comes for us to cover them, or when we see an opportunity to serve the community at a deeper level, then we know who we can touch in a community and who the community's actually really conferred authority and they have their authentic leaders in the neighborhood, not just the folks who have become most adept at showing up in the media representing the neighborhood. The part about this approach that I think people miss the most when we talk about it, and that we always have to keep bringing people back to over and again, is so much more fun. It's a so much more interesting way to do what we do, because so much of our day is spent handling difficult things, whether it's the internal stuff of our budget and governance and kind of all of that, and our program officers and figuring out our mission, vision, values, all that. There's all the doing of our organization, but then there's also the subject matter of what we cover, which is hard. Detroit is a hard place to cover. But getting out there and having these one-on-one or small group, these leadership opportunities, these service opportunities where you get out and be with people. We've done events where we've organized our listeners to help raise money to help deliver books to the neighborhood. We've delivered over 22,000 books to kids who need them in Detroit, and every single one of them has a sticker on the inside cover that says, "This book is a gift of the donors of WDET." And then our donors come in, they sticker those books, they package them up, they help us deliver them, they put them directly into the hands of kids. People lose sight of what it really means to make that one-on-one difference in a human being's life. And then when you can kind of get yourself out of your own way in your own organization and your own preoccupations and really take on service at that level, then you get to drill right down into the community. And then you're quickly seeing that what's happening in our neighborhood and what people are talking about is what's showing up in your Twitter feed and on CNN. And that's when you start to really see that global and local connection, there's no separation at all.